If someone built a universe for a single person to experience, that universe would not look strange. It would look ordinary. It would look exactly like the room you are lying in right now. That is the quiet, unsettling thought waiting underneath tonight's journey. Not that reality is fake, not that anything is wrong, only that a world tailored precisely to one observer would be, by design, indistinguishable from a world that simply exists. Welcome back to those who return each night, and welcome in to those who found this by accident, or maybe not by accident at all. If these slow explorations bring you something, a gentle subscribe helps them keep drifting outward into other restless minds. And for those who feel there is always something more underneath, something the surface of a video can never fully hold, that quieter conversation continues in the quiet room on Patreon, linked below. It is where people like us, minds that don't quite switch off, sit with the truths the algorithm tends to bury. No pressure, only an open door. Tonight we drift through a strange idea that the fit between you and the cosmos may be closer than coincidence allows, that physics, perception, memory, and meaning might all be leaning ever so slightly toward the one who happens to be watching, toward you, breathing softly in the dark. Notice for a moment that you are breathing. You did not decide to. It happened while you were thinking about something else. The way it has happened every second since you were born, and the way it will keep happening long after this sentence fades from memory. Air enters, air leaves, the chest rises in a rhythm older than language, and yet when you sit with it a little longer, something curious surfaces. The air moving through you right now is not a generic gas. It is a very specific mixture, tuned within astonishingly narrow limits. Roughly 78 parts nitrogen, 21 parts oxygen, a whisper of argon, a trace of carbon dioxide, faint hints of water vapor. Change those numbers even slightly, and everything unravels. Push oxygen up by only a few %, and forests would ignite from a single spark. Ordinary lightning would set continents burning. Push it down by a similar margin, and lungs would strain, fires would refuse to catch. Complex life would struggle to hold its shape. The window that permits a warm, breathing body to exist is not wide. It is a slender corridor, and somehow you are standing inside it. Nitrogen, which fills most of every breath, is often ignored. It passes through the body almost untouched. Yet without it diluting the oxygen, the atmosphere would be too reactive to hold anything alive for long. Nitrogen is the quiet buffer, the silent partner. The reason fire does not simply spread from lung to lung across the surface of a planet. There is something worth pausing on here. Air is invisible. It carries no color, no obvious weight, no announcement of its precision. It behaves like nothing at all. And yet this nothing is calibrated with the delicacy of an instrument, and the instrument is tuned exactly to a body that inhales roughly 20,000 times a day, without ever being asked. Some have wondered whether this fit is a happy accident, one that any thinking creature would inevitably notice about its own environment. Others feel there is something a little too neighborly about it, as if the room were furnished before the guest arrived. You can feel this if you slow the breath a little. Let the next inhale draw in slowly, and notice how the air seems to know exactly where to go. Into the throat, down into the lungs, across the delicate tissue where gas quietly trades itself for life. No effort is required, no translation. The molecules and the body speak the same language without ever being introduced. On one hand, this is chemistry, simple, elegant chemistry, refined over billions of years. On the other hand, it is a kind of intimacy. The atmosphere and the animal fit each other so precisely that the boundary between inside and outside blurs. Every breath is a small negotiation in which the world enters the body, becomes the body for a moment, then leaves again slightly changed. Perhaps this is only the way life adapts to whatever conditions surround it. Perhaps organisms shape themselves to fit their environment, not the other way around. And yet, sitting with it in the dark, there remains a soft, unresolved question. Why is the environment so willing to be shaped into a companion at all? The first clue is not dramatic. It is only this. The air has been waiting for you quietly, since long before you knew you needed it. Now let the attention drift upward, past the breath, past the ceiling, past the roof, past the thin veil of atmosphere, until it reaches the light. Sunlight, when it finally arrives at the surface of a planet, has already travelled about 8 minutes through empty space and then plunged through layers of gas that scatter and filter it. What reaches your eyes is not the raw output of a star, it is a carefully edited version. Ultraviolet has been trimmed, much of the infrared has been softened. What remains, what your eyes actually see, is a narrow band called visible light. Here is where something quietly extraordinary appears. The sun radiates most strongly in that same narrow band, and the atmosphere is nearly transparent in precisely that same range. And the cells at the back of your eye, the tiny cones and rods packed into the retina, respond most sensitively to that same slender window. 3 separate systems, star, sky, and eye, are tuned to one another with a strange, understated precision. If sunlight peaked in ultraviolet instead, your eyes would be nearly blind, and the sky drowned in radiation. If the atmosphere absorbed visible light and let ultraviolet pour through, life would burn under an invisible fire. If your retinas were sensitive to a different range, sunrise would look like static, and faces would dissolve into noise. Instead, the 3 systems align quietly, and you get to see. You get to see the color of someone you love, the green of a leaf, the soft blue of dusk, the particular gold of a lamp left on in another room. Some have described the retina as a small piece of brain that migrated forward to taste the light. It contains around 100 million rods for low light, and roughly 6 million cones for color. The cones themselves come in 3 varieties, each tuned to a slightly different slice of that narrow, visible band, and together they weave the entire spectrum of everything you have ever seen. Consider gently what this means. The visible world, everything you have ever called beautiful, is a tiny sliver of the actual electromagnetic spectrum. Radio waves stretch out for kilometers, gamma rays vibrate faster than atoms. Between these extremes lies a band so thin that if the spectrum were laid across a football field, visible light would occupy less than the width of a coin, and yet that coin width is exactly where your eyes were built to look, and exactly where the sun sends most of its energy, and exactly where the sky agrees to be transparent. On one hand, evolution offers a clean explanation. Eyes developed in water and then air, tuning themselves over hundreds of millions of years to whatever light happened to be available. Any creature that develops vision on a sunlit planet would, of course, tune to that sun. This makes the coincidence seem inevitable. On the other hand, there is still the quieter question. Why does a universe running on cold physics arrange 3 unrelated systems so that a soft-bodied creature can, one day, open its eyes and recognize its mother's face? Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything. Perhaps the difference between those 2 answers is smaller than it seems. When the light is gentle and the world is willing to be seen, consider the sound of your own heartbeat. If you place a hand quietly on your chest or press an ear into a pillow, you can find it. A soft, steady thud, roughly once per second, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. It has been keeping this rhythm since long before you were born, and it will continue for as long as you remain. Your ears, meanwhile, are tuned to a very particular range of vibrations, roughly 20 Hz at the low end, up to about 20,000 Hz at the high end when you were younger, less as the years pass. Below that range, sound becomes a rumble you feel rather than hear. Above it, sound disappears into a silence that bats and dolphins swim through without effort, and here another quiet fit appears. The frequencies most important to a human life, another voice, a footstep, a warning cry, wind through leaves, water over stone, all fall inside your hearing range. The world speaks in a register your ears were prepared to receive. Just as with light, the instrument and the message meet in the middle, but something even stranger sits underneath this. Your body carries clocks, many of them. The heart has its own, the breath has its own, the gut has its own, and overseeing all of them, tucked deep in the brain, is a small cluster of cells that keeps a rhythm remarkably close to 24 hours, close but not exact. Left in a cave with no sunlight, most people drift toward a slightly longer day. Then daylight arrives, and the drift disappears. The eyes catch the morning. A signal is sent, and the internal clock quietly resets to match the rotation of the planet. Your body, without your permission, has been keeping time with the Earth turning on its axis every day of your life. Some have wondered how deep this goes. The rhythm of the heart, roughly 1 beat per second, sits comfortably inside the range at which human music tends to feel natural. Slow music drops below it, fast music rises above it, and the body seems to know the difference. A lullaby often hovers near 60 beats per minute, close to a resting pulse. A dance beat pushes into the range of a body in motion. The music that soothes you and the music that moves you seem to have been written in the language your own tissue already speaks. On one hand, this looks like adaptation. Ears evolved on a planet that spins once a day and produces certain kinds of sound. Bodies evolved rhythms that match survival. Nothing mystical is required. On the other hand, sit with it a little. Your pulse is tuned to your species. Your hearing is tuned to your world. Your internal day is tuned to your planet's rotation. 3 clocks working together, none of which you designed, none of which you consciously maintain, all synchronized to a body that briefly wakes up and calls itself you. Maybe the fit is only discovery. Maybe organisms find themselves matched to their setting because unmatched ones did not last. And yet, some have felt in a quiet moment that the setting was oddly ready, that the frequencies of the world seem to include a small band reserved for a listener like this one. The room, it turns out, has music in it, and the music is playing at exactly your frequency. Notice, gently, the weight of your own body against the surface beneath you. You are being pulled toward the center of a planet, right now, constantly. The pull is called gravity, and it is one of the oldest, quietest forces in existence. It shapes galaxies. It bends light, it holds oceans to the ground, and it holds you softly against your bed. But consider how narrow the setting is. If Earth's gravity was significantly stronger, bones would need to be thicker, muscles denser, movements slower. Falling from any height would become catastrophic. Insects the size of your hand would collapse under their own weight. If gravity was significantly weaker, atmosphere would slowly leak into space. Oceans would puff outward, and organisms would grow long and fragile in ways that could barely stand up to a breeze. The pull you feel right now is neither. It is the middle. A middle so precise that a body of roughly 70 kilograms can walk, run, jump, dance, and sleep without ever thinking about the force that decides whether any of it is possible. Some scientists talk about a habitable zone, the distance from a star where liquid water can exist on a planet's surface. Too close, and water boils away. Too far, and it freezes permanently. Earth sits comfortably in the middle of that band. But there is a second, less discussed corridor, a gravitational corridor. Planets need enough gravity to hold on to atmosphere, enough to keep a molten core, enough to sustain a magnetic field, but not so much that their surfaces crush any complexity that tries to rise. Earth's mass falls inside that corridor, as if it were placed there. A gentle way to feel this is to imagine standing on the moon. There, gravity is only about 1/6 of what you know. A single step would carry you several meters. Your body, weightless in comparison, would drift like a slow leaf, and yet the moon holds almost no atmosphere. Its air, whatever thin trace exists, drifted away long ago because its pull was not quite strong enough to keep it. Then imagine standing on Jupiter where you cannot stand at all. The gravity would crush anything resembling a human structure. Between these extremes you rest. Not too heavy, not too light. There is a small quiet detail here that many overlook. The strength of gravity is not just about weight, it is about time. It is about heartbeats. It is about the speed at which a body ages, at which a plant grows, at which water falls from a cloud. Change gravity and you change the tempo of everything, from the ripening of fruit to the pacing of thought. On one hand, this is simply where Earth happens to be, a planet of a certain size, at a certain distance, in a certain kind of solar system. On the other hand, when you notice how many things gravity secretly regulates, and how narrow the acceptable range is, the pattern of clues begins to lengthen. Air, waiting, light, tuned, sound, matched, and now weight, arranged so a soft creature can rise, walk, and lie down again without breaking. The word habitability begins to sound softer, more attentive, less like a category, more like a courtesy, as though somewhere, quietly, the setting was chosen with a very specific guest in mind, who is now, at this moment, resting inside it. Turn your attention for a moment toward the water inside you. Roughly 60% of your body is water. Blood, lymph, saliva, the fluid inside every cell, the moisture on the surface of your eyes, the thin film that keeps your lungs alive. All of it is water. If you could gently remove it, what remained would weigh less than half of what you are. Now consider the water outside you, oceans that cover most of the planet, rivers that thread continents, clouds that carry entire lakes above your head in silent floating masses, ice locked at the poles, vapor rising from a cup nearby, the same molecule arranged in different postures everywhere. There is a strange kind of continuity here. The water in your bloodstream is not different, in any chemical sense, from the water in a distant sea. It is the same simple structure, two hydrogen atoms bent around one oxygen, held together by a small, quiet electrical asymmetry. That asymmetry, called a hydrogen bond, is one of the most understated forces in the universe. It is weak, easily broken, and yet, because of it, water can dissolve almost anything, carry heat gently, remain liquid across an unusually wide range of temperatures, and cling to itself in droplets that hold their shape against gravity. Without hydrogen bonds, water would behave more like other small molecules. It would boil at temperatures far below zero. Oceans would not exist. Cells could not form. Rivers would be gas. Rain would not fall. The entire architecture of life depends on this small, off-center pull, which no one designed and everyone drinks, and there is a stranger thought underneath this. The water in your body was not made recently. It is very old. Its atoms formed inside ancient stars, long before the sun existed, then drifted through space, then arrived on a young planet, then cycled through oceans, glaciers, ferns, dinosaurs, storms, and eventually into a body that briefly calls itself yours. When you drink glass tonight, you are welcoming molecules that have been on a journey longer than any story ever told. Some have wondered whether the boundary between inside and outside is really as firm as it feels. You are largely water. The world is largely water. The two exchange constantly. You breathe out water. You sweat it. You cry it. Rain returns it. Every few weeks, most of the water in your body has been replaced. What you call your body is, in one sense, a slow, patient river passing through a shape. On one hand, this can feel unsettling. Nothing about you seems fixed. On the other hand, sit with it a little longer, and something calmer arrives. The self you carry is not sealed. It is not a fortress. It is a soft, continuous conversation between the world and the shape it briefly wears, the ocean and the eye, the rain and the tear, the cup and the cell. These are not different substances behaving similarly. They are one substance, moving through different rooms. Perhaps that is why water so often carries the feeling of memory. It has been everywhere. It has been everyone. It is quietly recycled through every creature that ever lived. And tonight, some of it is you. The room once again folds a little inward. The world does not stop at your skin. It flows through you softly, on its way to somewhere else. Step back for a moment and let all the clues gather in one place. The air tuned to a body that breathes, the light matched to eyes that see, the sound arriving at frequencies ears can hold, the weight calibrated so a soft creature can rise and rest, the water moving through everything, carrying warmth, memory, and continuity. Any one of these could be dismissed as coincidence. Together they begin to feel less like accidents and more like the settings of a carefully prepared space. Consider the deeper layers you rarely notice. Around this planet, an invisible field extends thousands of kilometers into space. generated by molten iron moving deep inside the core. This field, called the magnetosphere, deflects a constant stream of high-energy particles arriving from the sun. Without it, atmosphere would slowly erode, DNA would fracture from radiation, life on the surface as it is known would not last. And yet the field is there, generated by a spinning heart of metal, hidden thousands of kilometers below your feet, silently protecting a body it will never meet. Consider the moon, a single oversized satellite for a planet this size, a companion so large that it stabilizes Earth's tilt. Without it, the axis would wobble more dramatically over long periods, and climates would swing in ways that might not permit anything as delicate as a settled civilization. The tides it raises stir the oceans, mix the chemistry, and pull gently on every drop of water in every body. Even now, as you lie still, the moon is tugging softly on the fluid inside you. Consider Jupiter, that giant world far beyond the orbit of Mars. Its enormous gravity acts as a kind of guardian, sweeping many asteroids and comets away from the inner solar system, absorbing some, redirecting others. Fewer impacts, more time, more stability, more silence for life to unfold in. Consider the sun itself, not too young, not too old. A middle-aged star of the right mass to burn steadily for billions of years, without the violent flares of smaller red dwarfs or the short, brutal lifespan of massive blue giants, long enough for complexity, gentle enough for continuity. Some have called this the architecture of habitability. Others have called it luck. The words matter less than the pattern. When you place a body in the center and let the environment expand outward, layer by layer, everything from the atomic to the astronomical seems to have arranged itself in a way that permits, and perhaps even invites, a single observer to sit up, look around, and wonder. On one hand, this is what would be expected. A creature can only ever wake up inside a setting that allowed it to wake. A cave dweller finds a cave, a fish finds water. A conscious being finds a world that supports consciousness. The observation seems circular. On the other hand, the circle is not empty. Something is inside it, and that something, tonight, is you. Maybe the planet is not a home in any personal sense. Maybe it is only a physical arrangement that happens to permit awareness. And yet, the closer the fit is examined, the more it resembles not a wilderness but a room, walls of atmosphere, a floor of ground, a ceiling of stars, a quiet light, a steady temperature, a gentle pull, a companion moon, and in the middle, a bed, and in the bed, a listener, breathing softly, held by all of it. The room, so carefully arranged, sits inside a larger house, and that larger house is held together by numbers. Not numbers you can see, numbers so hidden that most people live entire lives without knowing they exist. Physicists call them the fundamental constants. They are the values, silently written into the fabric of reality, that decide how strong forces are, how heavy particles become, how tightly atoms hold themselves together. Change them, and everything changes. Imagine, gently, a small panel of dials, not made of metal, not attached to any machine, just settings, floating quietly beneath the visible world. One dial adjusts the strength of gravity, another dial adjusts the pull between electric charges, another decides how strongly the tiny particles inside atoms cling to one another, another dial sets the mass of the electron, another the mass of protons and neutrons. No one has ever turned these dials. As far as science can tell, they were set before anything else existed, and their positions are, to put it mildly, extraordinary. Take one of them, the fine structure constant. It is a small number, close to 1 over 137. It governs how strongly light interacts with matter. If it were slightly larger, chemistry would stiffen. Atoms would refuse to bond in familiar ways. If it were slightly smaller, atoms would fall apart before they could form molecules. The window in which stable, patient chemistry can arise is remarkably narrow, and the dial rests quietly inside that window. Or take gravity's coupling. Its strength is astonishingly weak compared to the other forces. If you find this hard to feel, Notice that a tiny magnet can lift a paperclip against the entire pull of the Earth. The whole planet loses that contest to a coin-sized piece of metal. And yet, if gravity were even a little stronger, stars would burn themselves out in a few million years, far too quickly for anything complex to develop. If it were a little weaker, matter would drift apart, unable to gather into suns at all. Between the two extremes, gravity sits at just the value that allows stars to shine for billions of years, long enough for planets, long enough for oceans, long enough for you. Some scientists have described these constants as the parameters of the universe. Others use the word settings. A few have used the word choices, though the word feels heavy and no one is entirely sure who or what might have done the choosing. On one hand, these numbers might simply be what they are. Perhaps there is no dial. Perhaps there is only one possible universe, and its values are locked by a mathematics too deep to see. In that case, no wonder is required. The universe is a single fact. On the other hand, if these constants could have been otherwise, then something is worth pausing on. Out of a nearly infinite range of possible values, they all sit inside a narrow band that permits atoms, stars, chemistry, planets, and eventually someone lying awake, wondering about them. Maybe the dials were never turned because they never needed to be. Maybe they were turned by something no language can name. Maybe the question of who turned them is smaller than the question of why they can be turned at all. For now, only this. The room has walls, the house has settings, and the settings tonight are precisely those that permit a listener. Look, gently, at the back of your own hand. Every visible curve, every faint line, every soft edge is made largely of one element: carbon, bound to hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few others, but built on a spine of carbon. So is every plant you have ever seen. So is every animal. So are the pages of every book, the wood of every tree, the ink on every letter you have ever received. Now consider that carbon should not exist in the quantities it does, or rather it almost didn't. In the first minutes after the earliest moments of the universe, the only elements produced in any large quantity were hydrogen and helium, two of the simplest possible atoms, nothing else. No carbon, no oxygen, no iron, no calcium. The universe in its youth was a very simple place. Just two ingredients, and light and expansion. Everything heavier than that had to be built later, inside stars. And here the arithmetic becomes strange. To make carbon, 3 helium nuclei must come together at almost the same instant. This is not easy. 2 helium nuclei can briefly stick, but the pair falls apart in a tiny fraction of a second, long before a third helium can arrive. By ordinary rules, carbon should almost never form. Stars should live and die, and only trace amounts of carbon should be left behind. The universe should be almost empty of it. And yet, look at your hand. Look at the tree outside the window. Look at every breath you exhale carrying carbon dioxide. The reason involves a quiet, delicate fact of physics. Inside the carbon nucleus, at a very specific energy, there is a kind of resonance, a small energetic doorway sitting at just the right level that allows the third helium to slip in during that vanishingly brief window before the first two fall apart. Without that resonance, at that precise energy, the reaction almost never happens. With it, stars can quietly become carbon factories. An astronomer named Fred Hoyle, decades ago, actually predicted this resonance before it was measured, not from experiments, but from a simple observation. Carbon exists, life exists. Therefore, something in the physics of the nucleus must permit it. His prediction turned out to be correct. The number he needed was there, precisely where it needed to be. Some scientists have called this the most surprising number in nature. Others have shrugged and said, "Of course, we would not be here to ask if it were otherwise." Both responses are honest. Neither fully closes the question. On one hand, the argument is simple. Any universe that produces carbon-based observers must have a physics that permits carbon. So finding such physics inside a carbon-based observer is not remarkable. It is inevitable. On the other hand, sit with it in the dark. The reason your body has a shape, the reason your hand can curl and uncurl, the reason a heart can be built at all, traces back to a single, delicate, energetic doorway hidden inside atomic nuclei. If that doorway sat at a slightly different height, none of this could stand. Perhaps carbon is only physics. Perhaps carbon is a small, quiet permission slip. Perhaps both. What is certain is that the dust you are made of passed through the fire of ancient stars, through a door that barely exists, and arrived at exactly your shape. The room, again, has been considerate. The materials it offered were not obvious. They had to be made. There is another dial, and it is even stranger than the others. For most of the 20th century, physicists thought empty space was, well, empty. Nothing in it. No energy, no force, just the stage on which everything else happens. Then, in the late 1990s, careful measurements of distant exploding stars revealed something no one expected. The expansion of the universe is not slowing down as gravity would suggest. It is quietly speeding up. Something is pushing space outward, something invisible, something present even where there seems to be nothing at all. This something, poorly understood, was given a placeholder name: dark energy. And when scientists tried to calculate its expected value using the best physics available, the number came out enormously large. So large that if it were correct, the universe would have flown apart before atoms could ever form. The measured value, though, is astonishingly small. Not zero, just very, very quiet. Small enough that space could expand slowly, gently for billions of years, allowing galaxies to gather, stars to shine, planets to cool, and life to unfold at a leisurely pace. The gap between the value physics predicts and the value actually observed is one of the largest discrepancies ever discovered. Some have called it the vacuum catastrophe. Others have simply called it a mystery. Consider what this means softly. Empty space is not empty. It carries a faint, uniform push, and that push is tuned to a value so mild that it does not disturb the slow, patient formation of everything you know. If it were 100 times stronger, galaxies would never have formed. If it were 100 times weaker, the universe might have recollapsed long before stars could stabilize. Instead, it sits close to one of the values that allows for a long, quiet cosmos. On one hand, this could be a temporary confusion. Perhaps the theory is incomplete. Perhaps something not yet understood cancels most of the predicted energy, leaving only a small residue. Perhaps future physics will clarify why the number is what it is, and the mystery will dissolve into ordinary explanation. On the other hand, that mystery has persisted for decades. Some theoretical models suggest that dark energy may not be a constant at all, but a slowly changing field. Others propose that the value could differ across regions of a much larger structure, and observers only find themselves in regions where the value happens to permit their existence. Still others hold that the deep answer waits behind physics not yet imagined. None of these are settled. Each of them in different ways remains open. What can be said gently is this: the universe expands. It does so at a rate small enough to allow structure, warmth, and time. That rate did not have to be small. Something about the arrangement of physics conspires, or was arranged, or simply happens to be, in a way that leaves room for slow things, for nebulae to swirl, for solar systems to settle, for evenings to grow long enough that a listener can drift towards sleep while thinking about it. Some questions do not need immediate answers. Some can be held, softly, like small stones in the pocket, warmed by the hand that carries them. The cosmological constant is one such stone. It sits, unresolved, at the center of modern physics. It sits, unresolved, at the edge of every quiet room, and it lets the universe breathe out, slowly, without tearing itself. If the settings of the universe are so precise, and if their precision is difficult to explain by ordinary chance, then physicists have sometimes reached for a very large idea. Not a certainty, not a proof, only a possibility whispered. What if this is not the only universe? Consider it slowly. In some models of the earliest moments of the cosmos, space itself may have gone through a phase of very rapid expansion called inflation. In certain versions of that idea, called eternal inflation, this process does not stop everywhere at once. Different regions stop expanding at different times, forming what look, from the inside, like separate universes. Each bubble might carry slightly different physics, different constants, different dials. In another line of thought, coming from string theory, the underlying mathematics allows for an enormous number of possible arrangements of extra hidden dimensions. Each arrangement produces a universe with its own laws. Some estimates suggest the number could be far larger than anything intuition can grasp. A landscape, some scientists call it, a vast silent field of possible universes, each with its own settings, most of which would not permit anything as delicate as a thinking being. If the landscape is real, then somewhere within it, there would be regions where the dials happen to sit in the narrow bands that allow atoms, stars, and observers. And of course, observers would find themselves inside those regions, not because they were chosen, only because those are the regions where finding is possible. This is the whispered possibility, that the strange fine-tuning we notice from inside our universe may look less strange when viewed as one draw from a very large deck of possibilities. There are important gentle qualifications to hold. The multiverse remains a proposal, not a confirmed observation. Some physicists find it a natural extension of theories they already use. Others find it untestable, or philosophically uncomfortable, or aesthetically empty. It is one hypothesis among many. It is not a settled feature of reality. It is a possible answer, whispered by some, doubted by others, and still awaiting the kind of evidence that can survive careful challenge. And it is worth noting softly that even if a multiverse exists, it does not answer the deepest question. It might explain why our universe has the settings it does, but it does not explain why the whole vast landscape exists at all. It shifts the question outward, not away. Instead of asking why one universe is finely tuned, one might then ask why a system generating universes exists in the first place, and what set the rules that allow it to generate anything. Some theoretical models propose that even the rules themselves could vary. Others suggest a single deeper mathematics from which all rules emerge. Still others hold that certain questions of ultimate origin may lie beyond what human physics can reach. This remains debated, perhaps for a very long time. On one hand, the multiverse is a spacious, generous idea. It softens the mystery of tuning by widening the stage. On the other hand, it does not close the mystery, it only relocates it. Tonight, it is enough to hold the possibility gently, without demanding a verdict. Perhaps there are other universes, humming quietly beyond reach, with different settings and different silences. Perhaps this one is the only one, tuned by something no one can name. Perhaps the truth waits behind a door language has not yet learned to open. The room does not require an answer, only a listener. Return, for a moment, to the shape of the question. The universe appears finely tuned. Its constants sit in narrow ranges that permit atoms, stars, planets, and observers. This tuning could be dismissed as coincidence. It could be explained by a multiverse. It could point to something deeper. And yet, sitting quietly in the middle of all these possibilities, there is a subtle, mirror-like idea that keeps returning. It is called the anthropic principle. It comes in two soft versions. The weaker version says something very simple. If the universe did not allow observers, no one would be here to notice its settings. So finding oneself inside a universe that permits observers is not surprising. It is guaranteed. Any observer who exists must by definition exist in a universe where observation is possible. Put simply, an ocean fish will never wake up on dry land and wonder about water. It will only ever wake up in water. The setting is not chosen by the fish is chosen by the setting. Only fish that fit the ocean ever get to notice the ocean at all. This version is calm, logical, and modest. It removes some of the mystery, but not all of it. It says, of course you find the universe habitable. You are one of the ones habit allowed to emerge. The stronger version goes further, and physicists disagree strongly about it. It suggests that the universe must, in some sense, produce observers, that the emergence of consciousness is somehow woven into the deep structure of reality. This is a much larger claim. It is also much harder to defend. Most scientists do not accept it in its full form. Some find it evocative, others find it overreaching. It remains a corner of philosophy more than of settled physics. Between these two versions lies a soft, unresolved country. On one hand, the weak version can absorb almost any tuning as inevitable, given that we are here to see it. It is elegant and difficult to argue against. On the other hand, it does not explain why any universe capable of hosting observers exists at all. It says the observer is not surprising given the universe. It does not say the universe is not surprising given nothing. Some scientists have described the anthropic principle as a mirror. When you look into the settings of the cosmos, you see something that resembles you, and it is impossible to tell whether the resemblance is a reflection of your own presence or a feature of the world independent of you. The mirror shows a face. The mirror does not explain who is looking. There is something quietly beautiful in this. It resembles how memory works. When you try to inspect a moment from your own past, you cannot separate the moment from the mind that is remembering it. The observer and the observation are entangled. So too, perhaps, with the universe. You cannot easily separate its settings from the fact that you are here to describe them. Some have wondered whether this means that consciousness plays a subtle role in the fabric of things. Others have insisted that it is merely a logical footnote, useful but modest. Both readings are honest. Neither can be forced. What remains softly is this. Whenever a mind looks at the universe, it finds a universe capable of producing that mind. The correlation is perfect, and perfect correlations always deserve a little wonder. Even if they do not always deserve a conclusion, the mirror is still on the wall. Tonight, it is only being noticed. Let all of it settle. The air tuned to your breath, the light matched to your eyes, the sound arriving at your frequency, the gravity gentle enough to hold you, the water moving through you, the atoms forged through a door that barely exists, the dials resting in narrow bands, the expansion whisper quiet, the multiverse whispered as a possibility, the mirror showing a face, and in the middle of every single one of these, softly, a listener. Not a hero, not a chosen one, just an ordinary conscious being, positioned somehow at the intersection of every improbability. Here is the quiet turn. Whenever a mind exists, that mind exists at the exact center of all conditions that permit it. It cannot help it. It cannot look at physics from outside physics. It cannot look at biology from outside a body. Every observation ever made by anyone was made from within a setting that allowed the making. This is not a claim about specialness. It is a claim about geometry. The observer is always at the middle of the observation. Now place this next to the fine-tuning. A universe with certain settings can produce observers. Those observers, once they exist, will always look up and find the settings suspiciously matched to their existence. It cannot be otherwise, because they cannot be otherwise. From inside any conscious life, the world will appear personally addressed. Some have found this thought deflating. If the fit is inevitable, they say, then the wonder is empty. Of course you fit your universe. What else could you find from where you are? On the other hand, other listeners have found it deepening. If every observer sits at the center of a world that appears made for them, then the mystery is not so much about the tuning as about the observing. The astonishing fact is not that the settings look personal. The astonishing fact is that there is a personal at all. That anywhere in this vast arrangement of atoms and forces, something wakes up and calls itself I. From here, a strange question begins to form. If a universe capable of hosting observers will always look from inside as though it were designed for those observers, then what would it look like if it were designed for exactly one observer, not for a species, not for a civilization, for a single specific consciousness? Some have wondered whether the two possibilities can even be distinguished from within. A universe generously tuned for many, and a universe precisely tuned for one, might feel identical from the middle. Both would present the same convenient air, the same visible spectrum, the same welcoming water, the same stable weight, the same steady sky. And this is where the chapters have quietly been leading, not toward a conclusion, toward a threshold. The question is no longer only, why is the universe finely tuned? The question softly is beginning to become tuned to what and to whom? To life in general, or to the mind that happens to be listening in the dark right now? The room once again feels close. The house once again feels precise. The mirror once again is on the wall, and in the mirror an ordinary face, which is either an accident of scale or the smallest, quietest hint that the settings were adjusted for a very particular guest. The door is not closed. The next chapter simply opens it a little wider. Notice quietly what is behind you. You cannot see it. Whatever wall, whatever ceiling, whatever soft edge of furniture is behind your head right now is invisible to you at this moment. And yet, if asked, you could describe it. You have a strong sense that it is there, that the room does not vanish just because you are not looking at it. But something curious happens when this sense is examined. Turn slowly in your mind and pay attention to the edges of your visual field, not the center, the far edges. What you may notice is that even in the center, the world is remarkably clear, and at the edges it is not. Colors dim, details soften. Faces at the periphery are barely faces, and still, your experience of the room feels seamless, whole, continuous. Nothing gaps, nothing flickers. Neuroscience has slowly revealed how this seamlessness is built. Your eyes do not stream in a smooth video, they jump, constantly. Small rapid motions called saccades sweep them around a scene several times a second. And here is the strange part. During each of those tiny jumps, vision is briefly suppressed. Your brain does not want blurry motion smearing your world, so it edits the smear out. Every time your eyes shift, you experience nothing, and yet you never notice these little blanks. The world seems continuous because the brain quietly stitches together snapshots and fills in the seams. Consider a small experiment. If you look at your own eyes in a mirror and shift your gaze from one to the other, you will never see your eyes move. Your reflection appears still, as if standing motionless. The movement is there. The camera in your head has simply chosen not to show it to you, and it goes deeper. Much of what you perceive as detailed peripheral vision is a kind of educated guess. The brain builds a model of the world from a small, clear central patch and a great deal of memory and expectation. It expects the room to remain roughly stable. So, unless something changes suddenly, it continues to render the room as though everything were in high resolution, even though almost nothing is. Some scientists call this predictive processing. The idea is that the brain does not simply receive information, it predicts. It generates a model of the world and then compares that model against incoming signals. When the model matches, nothing changes. When it does not, attention flares, corrections happen, and the model updates. What you experience as reality is largely the model, quietly confirmed by sensation. This is where a strange thought slips in. If most of what you see is being generated by expectation, and only lightly confirmed by direct sensing, then in some soft, real sense, your brain is rendering the world, not creating it, but drawing it. Selectively, on demand. Where attention lands, detail appears. Where attention drifts, detail thins. On one hand, this is efficient biology, a brain that rendered every corner of every room in full detail all the time would consume unimaginable energy. On the other hand, sit with it in the dark. The room behind your head is a suggestion, a promise, a memory shape held in place until you look. If you were designing a simulation that had to run inside a limited system, this is exactly how you would build it. Detail would appear where the player looked. Everything else would be a low-cost placeholder, ready to be filled in on demand. Perhaps this is only what brains do. Perhaps it is what reality does. Perhaps, on some quiet level, the difference is smaller than expected. Something even quieter waits underneath perception. For most of history, the small world, the world of atoms and particles, was assumed to work like the large world, just smaller, little balls of matter bouncing around, each with a definite position, each behaving in a definite way, whether or not anyone was watching. It was a comforting picture. It happened to be wrong. In the early 20th century, careful experiments began to reveal a much stranger behavior. At the smallest scales, particles seemed to exist as smeared possibilities rather than definite objects. An electron did not travel along a single clear path. Instead, it appeared to travel along many possible paths at once, in a soft haze of maybe. Only when a measurement was made did the haze collapse into a single definite result. This is called the measurement problem, and physicists still debate what it truly means. One interpretation, called the Copenhagen view, suggests that reality at the small scale is genuinely undefined until it interacts with something that measures it. Another, called the many worlds interpretation, proposes that every possibility actually happens in a vast fanning of parallel outcomes. Still other interpretations exist, and none has been decisively proven over the others. They remain models offered gently, each with strengths, each with weaknesses, but sit with the shared feature. Whether interpretation A or interpretation B is correct, all of them agree that measurement is not passive. Somehow at the deepest levels, whether a definite reality shows up seems tied to whether an interaction takes place. An even stranger version of this appeared in what are called delayed choice experiments. In these carefully controlled setups, decisions made after light or particles have already traveled seem to influence whether they behave as waves or as particles, not because information travels backward in time, rather because the very question of what a particle was doing may not be answerable until an appropriate measurement forces it to have an answer. This is difficult to feel with the body. It resists intuition, so let it be softened. Imagine a piece of music. Before you press play, is the music sounding? In a sense, yes. The notes are written, the instructions exist, but the actual sound, the wave in the air, the vibration in your ear, only arrives when the recording is played. Reality at very small scales seems to behave a little like this. The instructions exist. The definite sound waits for the interaction that will let it become something. Now bring back the previous idea, the brain that renders what it looks at, and place next to it this quantum idea that the world at some level seems to sharpen into definiteness upon interaction. Two very different fields of science, one from neuroscience, one from physics, both pointing from opposite directions toward the same soft strangeness. Reality appears cooperatively resolved. Perception meets a world that seems oddly willing to be perceived. Some scientists are careful to note that this quantum behavior is not necessarily about consciousness in any deep sense. A measurement in the quantum context is any interaction that leaves a record. A camera can do it, a rock can do it, a stray photon can do it. So the world does not need a human to be defined, but the fact that definition itself depends on interaction remains striking. On one hand, this is only the quiet strangeness of small things. On the other hand, it means that the world you experience is not a fixed backdrop. It is a conversation, whispered, ongoing, between what is out there and whatever it is that turns to face it. Now turn softly toward your own past. Bring up a memory. Any memory, a morning from your childhood, a conversation from last week, the face of someone you have not seen in years. Notice how it arrives, not as a perfect recording, not as a video played back frame by frame. It arrives more like a small painting, a general shape, a feeling, a few sharp details, and a great deal of quiet, filled-in space. This is not a flaw. This is what memory is. For most of history, memory was imagined as a kind of storage room. Experiences were placed on shelves. Recall opened the door and retrieved them. Modern neuroscience has slowly dismantled this picture. Memory, it turns out, is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain assembles the memory again from scattered fragments distributed across many parts of itself. The hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain, plays a central role in stitching these fragments back into a coherent scene. But here is the strange part. Each time this reconstruction happens, small edits can occur. Details shift. Emotions color the scene differently. Newer information sneaks in. The next time you remember the moment, You may be remembering the previous reconstruction more than the original event. Over years, memories drift. They soften, they rearrange themselves, and you never notice because from the inside, each retrieval feels as though it is pulling directly from the past. Careful studies of memory have shown how easily this happens. Witnesses to the same event often recall wildly different details. Confident memories can be entirely wrong. Sometimes entire experiences can be gently suggested into a mind and, over time, feel just as real as anything that actually happened. Not because people are dishonest, because memory itself is a construction, not a copy. Now consider what this means for the sense of a continuous self. The you that reads these words feels like the culmination of a life, a long, unbroken thread of experiences leading from childhood to this moment, and yet that thread is not stored anywhere. It is being rebuilt, constantly, on demand, from sparse notes scattered across the brain. Your history is more like a novel that is rewritten each time it is read than a book locked safely in a drawer. This can feel unsettling, or it can feel oddly familiar. If you have ever wondered why old memories seem to have a warm, slightly unreal quality, this is partly why. They have passed through you many times. Each pass has smoothed them, edited them, quietly repainted them. What you carry is not the past. It is your latest version of it. Bring this back to the theme quietly building. If your visible world is being rendered on demand, and if the quantum layer only sharpens into definition through interaction, and if your own past is continuously reconstructed from sparse save files, then the entire self, past and present, is a rendering, not fake, not false, just built. Some scientists have offered a soft comparison. Memory works less like a hard drive and more like a compressed file. Only the essentials are stored. The rest is rebuilt from context, using rules the brain has learned about how the world usually behaves. This is why familiar things are easy to remember and truly novel things are harder. The compression only works well for patterns already known. You are, in this sense, a compressed life. And every night, in dreams and in the quiet between them, the file is quietly resaved. And what of the quietest hours? Every night, without asking permission, the mind builds worlds. Not always dramatic ones, sometimes only fragments. A kitchen from an old house, a face that is almost familiar, a hallway that does not exist anywhere in waking life, streets that seem to belong to a city no map contains, and while you are inside them, they feel entirely real. Solid floors, real weight, full light, voices, emotions, consequence. Then something changes. You wake. The world you were inside dissolves as if it had never been. Only a soft residue remains. And yet, for the minutes or hours you were there, that world was, in every experiential sense, real to you. Sleep science offers a gentle map of what may be happening. Most vivid dreaming occurs during a stage called REM, rapid eye movement, when the brain is highly active, almost as active as when awake, but with the body held still by a temporary quiet in the muscles. During this stage, the parts of the brain responsible for imagining, remembering, and emotionally coloring experience become intensely engaged. Meanwhile, some of the parts responsible for critical thinking and self-monitoring become quieter. What emerges is a full, immersive world, built entirely from within. The remarkable thing is not just that the brain can build these worlds, it is how convincing they are. Inside a dream, you rarely doubt the reality of the setting. Even absurdities feel normal. You accept them the way you accept the shape of your own hand. It is only from outside, upon waking, that the strangeness becomes visible. Some have wondered whether waking life might share a subtle kinship with dreaming. Not that waking is a dream, but that the same machinery that builds a dream world at night quietly participates in constructing the waking world by day. During dreams, the brain constructs everything. During waking, it constructs less because it is anchored by incoming sensory information. Yet the machinery is largely the same. In both states, the mind offers a rich, seamless experience. Only the anchoring differs. Some experienced lucid dreamers report noticing something curious. When you become aware inside a dream, and look carefully at a wall, the wall does not remain stable. Text may shift, details may reorganize. If you focus intensely on something small, it may morph. The world in a dream is only as detailed as attention insists. Where attention rests, detail arrives. Where it wanders, detail slips. This should feel familiar. It is the same behavior described earlier in waking perception. The rendered world, the peripheral fill-in, the convenient stability where you look, and the flexibility where you do not. On one hand, dreams and waking are clearly different. Waking is stable across days and shared with others. Dreams belong to one mind and vanish. This is a genuine difference. It matters. On the other hand, softly, the machinery is nearer than most assume. Both are worlds generated by a brain. Both feel real from inside. Both use similar structures to construct scene, self, and time. Perhaps what changes is only the level of shared anchoring, not the fundamental process. If reality on the small scale is politely undefined until measured, and if perception is a rendering, and if memory is a reconstruction, and if dreams show that a mind can generate whole worlds on its own, then the boundary between reality and rendered experience begins to blur, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, philosophical one. Something is being built from somewhere, every waking, every sleeping moment. Now consider gently how narrow your window on the world really is. Physics describes a universe that is unimaginably vast, roughly 93 billion light-years across in observable extent, hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars, each often surrounded by worlds no eye has ever seen, timescales stretching back nearly 14 billion years, particles smaller than a heartbeat can measure, forces reaching across distances no journey could cross. And now consider what actually reaches you: a small volume of air, a local horizon, a slice of visible light, a limited band of sound, a patch of tactile surface, a single mouth of taste, a single lifetime of days. If everything you had ever perceived were compressed into raw sensory bandwidth, some scientists estimate the total flow through your nervous system to be a modest few 100 million bits per second, of which only a tiny fraction ever reaches conscious awareness. Most of what your senses gather is quietly discarded before it becomes experience. Even so, you feel that you know the world. You feel that you have seen enough of it to have opinions about it. In truth, you have witnessed a nearly invisible sliver of a nearly infinite whole, and from that sliver your mind has built the confident, textured, coherent thing called a life. There is something quietly stunning in this. If reality is a vast broadcast, you have been listening to one very small station, and your mind has treated that one station as if it were the entire signal. Now bring in the earlier ideas. Perception renders selectively. Attention samples a narrow slice of a narrow slice. Memory compresses further, saving only what fits into the patterns already known. Dreams show that the mind can weave immersive worlds from very small amounts of raw material, and the vast majority of what exists never touches any of the senses. If you were designing a system to give one observer a full, meaningful life without needing to render the entire universe in real time, this is exactly what you would do. Deliver a small local slice, fill it with just enough sensory detail to feel real. Compress the rest. Let attention decide what needs to be sharp. Let expectation fill in what does not. Store memories as sparse notes. Reconstruct as needed. You would build, in other words, a single observer architecture. Efficient, local, custom, just enough for one life to feel complete. On one hand, this is only how any biological system would organize itself, on any planet, in any universe. Limited resources, limited energy, limited attention. Of course, mind sample selectively. The alternative, full omniscient rendering, is beyond any known biology. On the other hand, when the many small facts of perception, quantum measurement, memory, and dream are gathered together, a pattern emerges that is difficult to ignore. The world is not being delivered to you in its full reality. It is being generated, softly, at exactly the resolution you can use. Any more would be wasted. Any less would break the experience. Some have called this efficient biology. Others have called it, gently, evidence of a carefully constrained rendering. The two descriptions may not be as different as they sound. Whatever explanation is preferred, the shape of the fact remains the same. A vast reality exists, and only a narrow custom slice of it ever reaches you. The room from this angle feels smaller, quieter, and more intimately arranged, rendered on demand for a listener still breathing softly in the dark. Consider a small, familiar feeling. You hear a name you have not thought about in years. Perhaps an old friend, a distant relative, a place you visited once. And then, within a day or two, that same name appears again in a song on the radio, in a book on someone's shelf, in a passing conversation on a bus. It feels for a moment like the world is quietly nudging you, as if a thread has been drawn between two unrelated events, and you happen to be the only one holding both ends. Most people have felt this. It has many names: coincidence, synchronicity, the uncanny, that soft sense that ordinary life has, briefly, arranged itself into a small pattern that seems addressed to you. Modern psychology offers a calm explanation. It is often called frequency illusion, sometimes known by another name involving a certain terrorist group, whose full title need not be repeated here. The idea is simple. Once a mind notices something, it becomes more likely to notice it again. Before the initial noticing, the world was filled with such names, appearing in the usual background of daily life. You simply were not tuned to catch them. After the noticing, your attention has quietly sharpened. What felt like sudden clustering is largely selective perception. Related to this is a wider phenomenon called apophenia, the tendency of the mind to see meaningful patterns even in random noise. Faces in clouds, voices in static, shapes in wallpaper. It is not a defect. It is how a pattern-hunting animal survives. Better to see one too many patterns than one too few. Both of these explanations are honest. Both are supported by careful experiments, and both, gently, do not quite cover the entirety of what such moments feel like. Because sometimes the coincidence is not just a repeated name. It is a name attached to something that changed a life. A stranger who happened to say the right sentence on the right day. A book that fell open to the right page in a bookstore. A phone call that arrived exactly when a heart was ready to receive it. The psychology of expectation can explain part of this. It cannot easily explain how the small, unlikely details keep aligning at the moments that matter. Some scientists have argued that most of these events are still statistical. When you consider how many small events happen in a life, meaningful coincidences are practically guaranteed. Others have wondered whether attention itself does something more subtle, tuning a mind towards certain events in ways that quietly shape which small doors it walks through. Still others hold that there may be layers of the world where meaning and matter are not as separate as they usually appear. This remains debated. Nothing is settled. The interesting thing is not the explanation. The interesting thing is the shape of the experience itself. From inside a life, a coincidence does not feel like a probability calculation. It feels like a small, quiet gesture, as if the world had briefly looked up. On one hand, this feeling can be explained by ordinary cognitive machinery. On the other hand, the machinery does not erase the felt weight of the moment. The two can coexist. A coincidence can be statistically expected and personally meaningful. Explanation does not have to compete with resonance. Perhaps the world is not sending messages. Perhaps the mind is only listening more finely for a while. Or perhaps, gently, the difference between listening more finely and being spoken to is smaller than daylight logic suggests. Now consider the shape of the people in your life. If you sit with this quietly, it can become almost dizzying. There are billions of human beings on this planet. Most of them you will never meet. Most of them you will never even hear about. And yet, from that vast crowd, a small handful were somehow braided into your story. Family, of course, but also friends who arrived by strange routes, colleagues found through unexpected doors, partners met by the smallest of accidents, teachers who happened to be there at the exact moment you needed to hear something. If you rewind any of these encounters, You often find a chain of tiny events that had to line up: a missed bus, a rescheduled meeting, a friend who suggested a cafe, a book someone left on a table. Change any of these, and the person may never have entered your life at all. Mathematics has some quietly beautiful things to say about this. There is a field called network theory that studies how people are connected. One of its more famous findings involves what is often called the small world phenomenon. In a large enough population where each person knows a few dozen others, and those others know a few dozen more, any two randomly chosen people can typically be connected by only a handful of intermediate acquaintances, sometimes described as 6 degrees of separation, though the actual number varies. Related is the birthday paradox. In a room of only 23 people, there is roughly a 50% chance that two share a birthday. This seems impossible at first, but when you count all the pairs of people in the room, the number of possible matches grows quickly, and improbable sounding coincidences become expected. The world is full of such hidden geometries. Encounters that seem unlikely are, in fact, statistically inevitable. As long as there are enough people and enough time, this should, in principle, calm the sense of curated meeting. And yet, from inside a life, it rarely does. Even knowing the mathematics, meeting the person who will change everything still feels like a small private miracle, because from your point of view, only one such meeting has to happen for it to feel curated. You do not experience the vast number of unmet strangers, you only experience the ones who arrived. There is a subtle wonder here. The mathematics gives an explanation. It does not remove the meaning. The two can lie together comfortably. Some have wondered whether the felt sense of curated encounter has any deeper root. Perhaps attention plays a role. People often meet others through activities they choose, places they visit, interests they pursue. What looks like coincidence is partly the geometry of shared preference. Others have speculated that certain kinds of readiness, an emotional openness, a psychological need, a quiet turning point, might make some encounters more likely to catch and hold. This is not fully understood. On one hand, the mathematics is calm, improbable meetings are common. Given enough people and enough moments, someone will meet almost anyone, and any life will contain surprising encounters. On the other hand, the felt experience of walking into a room and finding the exact person you were meant to know remains one of the most quietly astonishing sensations a human life offers. The universe, viewed from a distance, is a vast network of possible connections. From inside a life, only a few of those connections light up, and those few together become the entire shape of your world, not because they are all that exists, because they are all that reaches you. Look back for a moment at the moments that mattered most in your life, not everyday moments, the turning points, the letter that arrived, the decision made in a single afternoon, the illness that changed everything, the chance meeting that redirected a career, the small yes or small no that quietly rewrote a decade. If you gather them, you may notice something curious. They are not spread evenly, they cluster. Certain years contain many, others contain almost none. And within those active years, the crucial moments often depend on details so small they are almost invisible. A conversation held 5 minutes longer, a train missed by seconds, a phone that rang at just the right time, a door opened not quite closed. Change any of them by a hair, and the life goes elsewhere. There is a field of mathematics that studies exactly this kind of sensitivity. It is called chaos theory. Its central discovery is that many systems in nature are extremely sensitive to initial conditions. Tiny variations at the start of a process can produce enormous differences later on. The most famous image is that of a butterfly. Its wings flapping in one part of the world might, through a long chain of causes, contribute to a storm in another. Whether or not this specific example is literally true, the general principle is well established. In complex systems, small causes can grow into huge effects. A life is a complex system. It is not surprising, then, that the small hinges bear the largest weight. Some have wondered why turning points seem to arrive in bursts rather than steadily. Psychologists have suggested that certain life stages, transitions between school and work, between one relationship and another, between health and illness, are moments of heightened sensitivity. During them, small nudges have larger consequences. In calmer stretches, the same small nudges would produce little. In sensitive stretches, they can redirect entire trajectories. This has a quiet consequence. Looking back, you can often see how one small event set off a cascade, but looking forward, you can rarely predict which small event will do so. The sensitivity is real, the visibility is not. You cannot know in advance which decision will be the one. Some listeners find this idea heavy. It seems to suggest that everything is fragile, that an entire life may turn on details too small to notice. On the other hand, the same principle has a gentler side. If small causes can grow into huge effects, then small acts of care, small moments of attention, small kindnesses in an ordinary afternoon can also ripple outward far beyond their apparent size. Fragility and possibility share the same root. Bring this alongside the earlier thoughts. If perception is a rendering, if memory is a reconstruction, if encounters are woven through unseen networks, and if the pivotal moments of a life turn on details thinner than a hair, then the shape of a life is not so much built as balanced, delicately, continuously, on a set of pivots, most of which are never even noticed while they turn. Some scientists remain committed to the idea that such shaping is entirely mechanical. Others feel that something quieter and less measurable may participate. This remains an open question. What can be said, softly, is that the timing of turning points is often astonishingly precise, not just improbable, personally addressed in feel, if not in fact. Whether the precision comes from chaos, from attention, from something beyond either, the effect on a life is the same. A few small windows, carefully placed. Through them, the future arrives. There is a different kind of coincidence, softer than the others. You may have noticed it. A certain image, a certain number, a certain animal, a certain phrase keeps appearing across your years, not constantly, just often enough to feel like a quiet companion, a recurring dream, a word you seem to trip over in unrelated books, a creature whose presence keeps arriving at difficult moments, a shape that shows up in the background of important scenes. These are not usually dramatic. They are personal, almost private, and they carry a strange emotional weight, one that does not match their ordinary appearance to anyone else. Depth psychology has a name for such repeating shapes. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung called them archetypes. The idea, broadly, is that the human mind carries certain deep patterns, images and themes that appear across cultures and centuries. The wise old figure, the threshold, the shadow, the child, the wanderer. Whether these arise from shared biology, shared culture, or something deeper, their persistence across human experience is striking. For each individual, certain archetypes seem to become more active than others, and through dreams, art, and coincidence, they seem to keep drawing themselves to attention. A person becomes quietly haunted by a certain motif. It appears and reappears until it feels almost like a signature. Modern neuroscience adds another gentle piece. The brain is a powerful pattern detector. It notices what it has been primed to notice. Once a symbol becomes emotionally charged, the mind returns to it. Attention seeks it out. Similar shapes are registered more readily. Environments are silently searched for its presence. The world does not need to send more of the symbol. The mind is simply catching more of what was already there. So we have two soft explanations sitting side by side. One from psychology, older, deeper, less measurable. Another from cognitive science, cleaner, more testable. Neither erases the other. Both may be partly true. Perhaps deep archetypal patterns exist within the human psyche. Perhaps attention gently sharpens toward them once they have been recognized. Perhaps both together produce the sense of a symbol that follows one home. There is a subtle wonder in noticing how deeply personal these symbols can be. Two people may live in the same city, share the same routines, and yet each be quietly attended by entirely different motifs. One person may keep meeting doors, another birds, another a specific number, another water, These recurrences do not always mean anything obvious, but they can carry a soft emotional resonance, as if a private language were being spoken between a life and whatever it is that watches its shape. Some have wondered whether these are gentle messages from within. Others feel they are the mind mapping its own inner landscape onto the outer one, allowing the outer to reflect the inner. Still others prefer to leave the question open. It is not necessary to decide. On one hand, symbols following you home can be explained fully by cognitive priming and emotional salience. On the other hand, even with that explanation, the felt experience is not diminished. The mind still receives the symbol. The moment still carries its weight. Meaning is not erased by mechanism. Bring this into the wider thought. If your world is rendered where attention lands, and your history is reconstructed by patterns already known, then the symbols that keep returning are, in a very real sense, structural features of your rendered life, not decorations, load-bearing themes around which a soft personal architecture keeps quietly building itself. Step back once more and look at the whole shape, coincidences that seem addressed, meetings that seem curated, turning points that pivot on hair-thin details, symbols that follow through years. Any one of these can be dismissed. Together, they form something harder to dismiss. They form a story that no one wrote down, and yet a story you can feel. Your story. Every human life, examined closely, seems to insist on being narrated. There are protagonists, though you may only recognize them decades later. There are turning points. There are motifs. There are quiet returns. There are foreshadowings that only become visible in retrospect. From inside, at any given moment, the narrative may seem chaotic. From a distance, patterns emerge. Some of this is undoubtedly the work of the mind itself. Human beings are natural storytellers. The brain, faced with a great mass of memories and impressions, organizes them into narrative. It selects, it emphasizes, it links. This is not deception. It is simply how meaning is made. Without narrative, life would feel like a pile of unrelated moments. With narrative, it becomes a journey. There is a subtle way to see this. Ask two people to describe the same event. Each will build a slightly different story. Ask the same person to describe the event 10 years later, and the story will have shifted, not because facts have changed, but because context has widened. Events that once seemed pivotal have shrunk. Events that once seemed small have grown. The story updates as understanding does. On one hand, this suggests that the shape of a life is largely constructed after the fact. There is no single true story out there, only the interpretations built by the mind that lives it. This is a modest, grounded view. On the other hand, examine the interpretations carefully. Even accounting for construction, certain lives seem to unfold with a coherence that feels stranger than random. Themes recur, losses lead into finds, illnesses open into insights, failures become foundations, whether by pattern seeking, by chaos-driven cascades, by something quieter. The effect from inside is often the same. A life reads in memory like a book, not like a diary of chaos. Some have called this the narrative structure of experience. Others have called it grace. Others still see it as a curated arrangement whose curator lies beyond human comprehension. This remains contested. Careful thinkers hold different views, and each view carries its own respect for the mystery. What can be said gently is that the story your life insists on telling is not entirely your invention, and not entirely delivered from elsewhere. It seems to be a collaboration between events you did not choose, attention you did not fully direct, symbols you did not consciously plant, and a mind that keeps trying, honestly, to make sense of all of it. Bring this alongside the earlier chapters. Air tuned, light matched, constants aligned, perception rendered, memory compressed, encounters threaded, turning points precise, symbols recurring. From very different directions, the same subtle shape keeps appearing. Something in the arrangement of the world seems personally addressed to something in the arrangement of you, whether that address is from the universe, from your own mind, from a deeper source no language can name, or from a subtle collaboration between all of them. The experience is real. Your life is not only happening to you, it is telling something. Softly, continuously. Even now, in the darkness of this ordinary room, the story is not yet finished. It rarely is by the middle of a chapter. Now we come to an idea that many people have heard, and few have sat with quietly. Some physicists and philosophers have proposed that reality, as it is experienced, may not be a fundamental thing at all. That underneath it, in some sense that words strain to reach, there could be a kind of computation, a structure, a process, something running, of which our experience is a rendered layer. This idea is often called the simulation hypothesis. It is not a claim, it is not a discovery, it is not a scientific fact. It is a possibility offered gently, most famously formulated by philosopher Nick Bostrom in the early 21st century. The formulation is careful. It says roughly this: if any civilization ever becomes capable of creating detailed simulated worlds populated by conscious observers, and if they choose to run many such simulations, then simulated observers might outnumber non-simulated ones. From inside, no observer could easily tell which category they belonged to. The argument leaves three possibilities open. Perhaps civilizations never reach that capability. Perhaps they reach it but choose not to run such simulations. Or perhaps such simulations exist and we might, statistically, be inside one. None of these is proven. None is easily refuted. The trilemma is meant to open a question, not to close one. It is important to hold this idea softly and carefully. First, this is one philosophical proposal among many, not a discovery about reality. Physicists debate it. Some find it intriguing, others find it unfalsifiable in principle. Still others find it a distraction from more grounded questions. It should not be treated as settled science, and it should not be treated as a metaphysical conclusion. Second, even taken seriously, the hypothesis does not remove ultimate questions of origin. It only shifts them. If we are inside a simulation, one may still ask who or what created the simulators, and who or what created their world. And beneath all of that, whatever the layered architecture may be, the deepest question remains: why is there anything at all rather than nothing? Whether the layers are called physics, or code, or something no language yet names, the mystery does not disappear. It only moves. There is something quietly humble in this recognition. The simulation idea is not a rival to older questions of meaning or origin. It is simply a fresh way of stating them. Whether the room is a physical universe carefully arranged, or a rendered structure carefully generated, the wonder of being in a room that fits you is not diminished. It may even be sharpened. Some have wondered whether the hypothesis is testable. Others suggest possible subtle signatures, patterns in physical constants, upper limits to computation, faint irregularities in the fabric of space and time. So far, no such evidence has clearly emerged. It remains a philosophical possibility, worth thinking about, not worth being frightened by. On one hand, the idea can feel disorienting. If reality could be a rendered construction, what happens to meaning? On the other hand, sit with it a little. The meaning you feel does not depend on the substrate. Love is love, in atoms or in code. Grief is grief. Awe is awe. Whether the room is made of physical particles quietly obeying laws no one wrote, or of something even more mysterious underneath, the experience of being inside it remains fully what it is, real to whoever is having it. The whisper then is not a claim. It is a small door in the wall of the room, open but not required to walk through. There is a natural next question. If the world could, in some soft sense, be a rendered structure, would there be traces? Would reality have pixels? At everyday scales, the world looks perfectly smooth. Zoom into a leaf and you find cells. Zoom into cells and you find molecules. Molecules resolve into atoms. Atoms into subatomic particles. And beneath all of that, physics begins to suggest that space-time itself might have a smallest possible size. Not a definite pixel in any confirmed sense, but a scale below which the ordinary ideas of distance and duration seem to lose their meaning. This scale is often called the Planck length. It is unfathomably small, roughly 1/millionth of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a meter, far below anything currently measurable. At such scales, general relativity and quantum mechanics, the two great pillars of modern physics, do not fit together neatly. Something else, some deeper theory seems needed. It has not yet been found. Some physicists have speculated that this smallest scale suggests reality has a fundamental resolution, a quiet, hidden grid. Others feel this is a misreading of the mathematics, and that space-time may remain smooth in ways not yet understood. The debate is real. No one has final answers. There is another related thought. In studies of black holes, physicists noticed a strange property. The amount of information that can be contained inside a region of space seems to depend not on the volume of the region, but on the area of its surface. This gave rise to what is called the holographic principle, a speculative idea that suggests the information describing a three-dimensional region might, in some deep sense, be encoded on a two-dimensional boundary. Take that in slowly. The observed depth of the world could, in principle, be a projection of information stored elsewhere. This does not mean the world is unreal. It suggests that reality's most fundamental description might be structurally different from how it looks to a mind embedded in it. Some have called this evocative, others have called it overreaching. It is a serious proposal in theoretical physics, still contested, still being explored. It should be held gently, not clutched. If you were told that a favorite film was actually stored as a stream of ones and zeros on a disc, you would not feel that the film had become less moving. The story would still hold, the characters would still ache, the music would still lift. The medium of storage would not touch the truth of the experience. So too, perhaps, with any deeper substrate of reality, whether the world is built from continuous fields, discrete quanta, information on a boundary, or something even less imagined, the experience of being here would remain what it is. For now, no one has found the pixels. If they exist, they hide well beneath every instrument yet built. Perhaps the room is genuinely smooth all the way down. Perhaps there is a grid so fine that no measurement will ever catch it. Perhaps the very question is misphrased, and reality's structure at its base is nothing any of us can currently picture. On one hand, the search for granularity is a legitimate scientific endeavor. On the other hand, its absence so far is compatible with many different worldviews. From the simplest realism to the strangest simulation-like proposals, nothing is forced, nothing is proven. Only the door of possibility remains softly open. The room does not need pixels to be a room. It only needs to be quietly holding you now. Look up for a moment at the sky. For over 60 years, careful listeners have been scanning the heavens for signals from other civilizations. Radio dishes tuned to distant stars, optical telescopes searching for laser flashes, missions to nearby planets sniffing for gases that might hint at biology. The universe is enormous. Given its age and size, it seems like it should be filled with voices, and yet it is quiet. This apparent silence has a name, the Fermi paradox. Named after the physicist Enrico Fermi, who reportedly asked at a lunch conversation, "So where is everybody?" The paradox is not that alien life must exist. The paradox is that, given how many suitable stars and planets are known to exist, and given how much time has passed, it seems strange that no clear evidence of intelligent civilization has yet reached us. There are many gentle proposed answers. Life may be far rarer than expected. Complex life may be even rarer. Technological civilizations may routinely destroy themselves. Distances may be too vast, and lifetimes too brief, for signals to arrive during our short listening window. Perhaps advanced civilizations become quiet, cautious, or unrecognizable. Perhaps our instruments are still too crude. Perhaps signals are all around us in forms we cannot decode. Perhaps we are simply very early. Perhaps we are very late. Each of these explanations is thoughtful. Each is worth respecting, and there is one more, quieter and stranger, that connects with the theme of this night. If, hypothetically, a rendered environment were built to focus on a single observer or a single civilization, then large regions of the surrounding universe might be filled with placeholder detail. Distant galaxies would appear beautifully populated by stars, but not by voices. The sky would look full and be lonely, not because life is impossible elsewhere, because there is no need to render other minds, if the render is centered here. This is not offered as an explanation. It is offered as one thought experiment among many, in the same spirit as the earlier ones. It is not scientific evidence for a simulation. It is only a soft observation that a single observer architecture, if it existed, would produce a universe that looked, from the inside, very much like ours. Grand, ancient, and silent. On one hand, the silence of the sky may simply mean that life is rare, or shy, or elsewhere in ways we cannot yet detect. This is the most common serious answer. It is entirely respectable and quite possibly correct. On the other hand, when the silence is placed next to the other clues, the tuning, the rendering, the coincidence, the story, the sense of address, a certain shape emerges. The universe is finely arranged to sustain a mind, and unusually quiet in every direction outside that mind's local sphere. Sit with the two together, without conclusion. Perhaps the sky is silent because voices are far. Perhaps it is silent because voices are hidden. Perhaps it is silent for reasons that lie deeper than either. It is worth being honest that no answer here is settled, and that even the deepest questions are still gently open. Some have found the silence lonely. Others have found it beautiful. Others still have found it neither, only accurate. However you receive it, notice this. In an unimaginably vast cosmos, the small warm circle around you, filled with breath, memory, familiar objects, and the soft sound of thought, is one of the very few places on this night where anything appears to be waking up and paying attention at all. There is a soft question underneath all these ideas. If, in any sense, the world you live inside were arranged, watched, or attended to, whether by physical laws finely tuned, by a deep architecture beyond understanding, by a rendering process, or by something no language can hold, how might that change the way a life is lived? This is not a question about proving anything. It is a question about ethics, about meaning, about the quiet interior tone of an ordinary day. For much of modern life, meaning has been treated as something invented, a story a mind tells itself to survive an indifferent universe. This view has intellectual dignity. It insists on honesty in the absence of proof. It refuses to pretend certainty where none exists. Many thoughtful people have found it liberating, though sometimes lonely. On the other hand, if the universe, at any level, is not indifferent, then the interior tone shifts, not necessarily toward any specific belief system, only toward an openness, a soft alertness, a willingness to treat one's own life as observed, in some sense, rather than unobserved. This shift is subtle. It does not require certainty. It does not demand belief in any particular tradition, any particular metaphysics, or any particular story about ultimate origin. It only asks whether a life lived as if it were attended to might be lived a little differently than a life lived as if no one were listening. Some have found that even holding the possibility gently and without insistence produces small changes. A kinder word chosen where a sharp one might have been used, a moment of gratitude at unexpected times, a softer response to what cannot be controlled, a quieter care in the ordinary details. This is not a proof of anything. It is only a description of what some listeners have felt. The idea of being observed with care, whether by physics, by a creator honored under any name, by some deeper attention that no view has fully captured, seems to widen the ethical horizon a little. It slows judgment. It softens harshness. It reminds a mind that others may be as attended to as it is. At the same time, this must be held without arrogance. Nothing is being claimed here about ultimate reality. No worldview is being pushed. It is quite possible that the universe is exactly as it appears to those who see it as unobserved by any deep source, and any felt attention is a projection of a lonely species. It is also possible that reality is attended to in ways that no human framework has yet described accurately. Both remain open. Both deserve respect. What can be said quietly is that the way a life is lived does not depend on resolving the ultimate question. Kindness matters in either case. Attention matters. Honesty matters. Care matters. Whether the universe is watching or not, a life lived with these small threads shining through it seems to become, from inside, a life worth having lived. There is a soft courage in choosing to live as though your ordinary hours were significant, even without proof. And there is a different, equally soft courage in choosing to live meaningfully without any need for external significance at all. Both are honorable. Both are found among thoughtful people. Neither closes the door on wonder. Whatever tonight's listener may believe, the small warm interior of an ordinary life still matters. Something is here, someone is here, and that alone, from any direction, remains one of the strangest and most beautiful features of the whole vast arrangement. There is another question, softer still, that waits underneath everything, even if science one day answers, in complete detail, how the universe operates. Even if physics uncovers the true nature of matter, energy, and information, even if theories are found that describe the smallest scales and the largest expanses with equal precision, even if consciousness itself is one day mapped and modeled with astonishing accuracy, even then, one question remains, and it is the quietest of all. Why is any of it here? Physics can describe how the universe evolves. It can describe rules, patterns, initial conditions, and possible histories. It can describe how things behave. It has been remarkably successful at this. And yet, the how does not touch the why. Why there is something rather than nothing. Why the rules are these rules. Why anything at all bothered to become. Some scientists have proposed models in which the universe may emerge from underlying fields, from prior states, from quantum fluctuations, from mathematical necessities, or from processes that lie beneath any current description. Each of these is offered as one possible explanation, and each is debated. One theoretical model may suggest a self-contained origin, another may propose an eternal underlying structure, others may hold that the deepest layer is not accessible to human physics at all, and that certain aspects of origin lie beyond scientific measurement, perhaps forever. None of these views is fully proven. Each has thoughtful defenders and thoughtful critics. What is clear in the calmest reading is that science explains mechanism, not meaning. It tells us magnificently how one state gives rise to another. It cannot by itself say why there are states at all. The question of ultimate origin, of ultimate purpose, and of ultimate ground seems to belong to a different kind of asking. Some have looked for its answer in philosophy. Some have looked in traditions of faith. Some have chosen to leave it open, unanswered, as an honest emptiness at the center of every explanation. This is not a failure of thinking. It may be one of its greatest achievements, to recognize, after all the reaching, that certain questions do not close, that the mystery is not a hole in knowledge. It is a feature of existence itself. The very fact that there is a universe to describe is not something the description can produce. Some have called this the limit of physics. Others have called it the beginning of wonder. Others still have called it the doorway of humility, past which language slows and finally goes quiet. You do not have to choose. You do not have to decide tonight whether the deepest ground of everything is called nature, or code, or law, or something that traditions have honored under many names. Whatever it is not something a script could contain, and it is not something the tiredness at the end of a day should have to resolve. It is enough tonight to notice that the question exists, to feel it gently, sitting quietly underneath every other question that has been asked, to let it be there without needing to solve it. It has waited for a very long time. It is patient. It can wait a little longer. There is a soft peace in that, in knowing that not every mystery must be resolved before rest, in knowing that some of the largest wonderings are meant to be held, not answered. The room has walls, the house has settings. Beneath them all, a soundless, gentle question, holding open the possibility that the reason for any of it may lie beyond every word that has ever been used to try. The night is nearly settled now. The ideas have gathered, softly, in the corners of the room, air quietly tuned, light matched to eyes, sound arriving at listening frequencies, weight held gently against a resting body, water moving through everything, elements built through doorways that barely exist, constant sitting inside narrow, life-permitting bands, perception rendered where attention lands, memory reconstructed from sparse fragments, encounters threaded through unseen networks, turning points balanced on details thinner than a hair, symbols returning through the years, and beneath all of it, the whispered idea that a room built for one observer would look, from the inside, exactly like an ordinary life. Somewhere along the way, the question began to change. At first, it seemed to be about simulation, about whether the world is a physical universe or a rendered structure, about whether the room is made of atoms or of something else. But those questions, quiet as they are, may not have been the deepest ones. The deepest question, gathering itself slowly across all these chapters, is not whether reality is simulated. It is why reality feels so personally addressed. Whether by physics tuned finely, by a rendering built carefully, by a creator honored under any name, or by something no view has yet described, the shape of experience remains the same. A world that fits a life that fits a world. The conversation always between one small consciousness and one enormous everything. Some have wondered whether this fit means the universe is designed. Others have wondered whether it only means that any consciousness inside any universe would feel this way. The two possibilities remain open. Neither has been closed, and it is possible that the truest answer lies past both, in a place language has not yet learned to reach. What can be said softly is this: whatever the ultimate nature of reality, the experience of being here is not made smaller by any of the frameworks. Meaning does not require certainty. Wonder does not require proof. The kindness in an ordinary evening, the quiet warmth of an ordinary breath, the soft strangeness of noticing that anything is happening at all, these do not depend on knowing the substrate. The journey was not about arriving at a verdict. It was about noticing the shape of the room, about sitting inside it long enough to feel how carefully arranged it seems, about holding the possibility gently without demanding an answer, that the settings of this life are somehow addressed to the one who lives it, and letting that possibility be an invitation, not a burden. You do not have to decide tonight whether you are inside a simulation, a physical universe, a created world, or something none of these words fit. It is enough tonight to have walked the length of the room quietly and noticed how it fits around you. Somewhere, in most nights that go long, there is a small voice that wants to solve everything, wants final answers, wants the shape of reality made plain before sleep can happen. This voice is familiar. It is the voice that keeps overthinkers awake. Tonight, that voice can be allowed to rest, because one of the quieter truths sitting under all these chapters is that unresolved does not mean unsafe. The largest questions of existence have remained open for as long as thinking has existed. No civilization has fully closed them. No philosophy has fully answered them. No science has finished them. And yet, generation after generation, people have found ways to live inside the questions, to love inside them, to grow old inside them, and to fall asleep inside them. Uncertainty is not a hole. It is a room. A large, soft, patient room. It has held every wondering mind that ever wondered. It is holding you now. Some have found this thought calming, to know that the biggest mysteries have been sat with by billions of others, in every culture, in every century, and that none of those minds needed to solve them in order to rest. To know that mystery is not a failure of the mind. It is the honest edge of any mind honest enough to see how much it does not know. There is a difference between not knowing and not being. Not knowing is spacious. It leaves room for many possibilities to breathe together. Not being would be silence. And the fact that you are here, wondering, is proof enough that the being is intact, whatever the shape of the underlying explanation. Sleep does not require certainty. Sleep only requires trust. A soft, undramatic trust that the ground beneath the day will still be there in the morning, that the questions can wait, that the room, whatever it is made of, will keep holding you while the mind puts itself down. Perhaps the universe is finely tuned by chance, perhaps by necessity, perhaps by something deeper than either. Perhaps you are inside a physical cosmos, a rendered structure, a created world, or something no framework has yet captured. Whichever it has been the case all your life, and every night of your life you have quietly rested inside it. Whatever it is has been reliable enough to carry you here. It will carry you a little further. There is peace in that. Not the peace of understanding, the gentler peace of trusting whatever holds the room to keep holding it. Set down softly the whole architecture of ideas. Set down the tuning, the rendering, the coincidence, the constants, the simulations, the frameworks. Let all of them rest for a moment in the far corner of the room. What is left? Only this: that inside a vast and quiet universe, some small pattern of matter has organized itself, tonight, into something that can notice, something that can breathe on its own, something that can hear the sound of its own breath, something that can wonder about the setting it finds itself in, something that can feel warmth, tiredness, curiosity, and the soft weight of a body on a soft surface. Whatever else may or may not be true, this much is unmistakably true. Something is happening. Someone is here. This is often overlooked in the search for grand answers. The largest miracle is not that the universe is tuned or rendered or arranged. The largest miracle is that anywhere inside it, awareness is happening at all. That from atoms silently obeying physics, some patient arrangement rose over billions of years that eventually asked, "Why am I here?" Some have called this the hard problem of consciousness. The question of why any physical process is accompanied by experience at all. It has not been solved. Many thoughtful thinkers have tried. Many honest views coexist. This is not the moment to solve it. It is only the moment to notice that experience is happening right now, in the quiet of an ordinary night, without asking permission. You do not have to earn this. You do not have to explain it. You are the one who notices. That alone is the smallest and largest fact of the whole arrangement. From here, gratitude can arrive without demanding an object. Not gratitude for anything in particular, just the soft, undirected gratitude of being the vantage point at which the universe briefly turns to look at itself. Whether by design, by emergence, by something both and neither, the looking is happening. Through you, tonight. If the room was built for one observer, then you are the observer. If the room was not built for anyone in particular, then you are still, from your own point of view, at its center, from any direction. The same simple, soft truth remains. You are the one who is here. The rest is a wondering. The room is quieter now. The thoughts are quieter now. The breath is quieter now. There is nothing left to solve tonight. Nothing left to decide. Nothing left to know before rest. The air, which was always tuned, is still tuned. The light, which was always matched, is dimming. The gravity, which was always gentle, is holding you gently. The water inside you is still flowing softly through the shape you briefly wear. The constants are still resting where they have always rested. The room is still exactly the room it has always been. Let the ideas drift. Let the tuning drift. Let the rendering drift. Let the coincidences drift. Let the story drift. Let the question of what any of it means drift. Quietly, out beyond the edges of thought. Nothing needs to be finished. Nothing needs to be resolved. Nothing needs to be understood before sleep. The breath goes in. The breath goes out. The breath goes in. The breath goes out. Slow. Softer. Slow. Softer. Whatever holds the room, whatever holds the world, whatever holds the vast, quiet cosmos and the small, warm center where you rest, is still holding it now. It has been holding it all your life. It will keep holding it while you sleep. You are safe. The night is safe. The questions are safe. They will wait. They are patient. They have always been patient. Let the shoulders soften. Let the jaw soften. Let the hands soften. Let the small tightness behind the eyes soften. Let the mind, which has carried so much today, set it all down at the edge of the bed. The room is quiet. The room is dark. The room is kind. If you drift, drift gently. If you dream, dream softly. If you wake in the night, know that the room is still the room, and the breath is still the breath, and whatever holds all of it is still silently holding. Slow, soft, slow, soft, slower still, softer still. There is nowhere to go. There is nothing to be. Only the breath, only the room, only the quiet space between one thought and the next, widening. Sleep well, rest deeply. The universe, however it is made, is patient enough to wait. Good night,